FM.
Thank you for coming.
My absolute pleasure.
You're Peter Hull MBE.
Indeed.
You're a power swimmer. You
Yeah.
took part in the Paralympics and
Did 50 back, 50 freestyle, and 100 freestyle. So I did 2 Paralympics. So for Barcelona, I was in Seoul, and I did 25-meter races. Yeah, but it's just the 50 and the 100-meter races.
Phone me up if you want or something.
Yeah.
There you go. So yeah. And then could you sort of like say who you are and your disability?
Yeah. My name's Peter. As previously identified, I am a retired Paralympian. I don't say ex because I'm not just myself, but I think anyone that said the Olympic or Paralympic oath, you become part of that international family. That's just personal effort. So yeah, I'm competing in two Paralympics. I currently work. I've actually got 2 jobs now. I work as an engagement lead for Active Nation, a local, they're a national charity, but they're very active in the Southampton area. And I work as within the active communities team. And my job is to make physical activity and sport in some instances accessible to the wider community. So anyone who would struggle to take part in a mainstream activity, whether it's as a result of, let's say, disability, or it could be finance, could be social structure or whatever, we're all about making activity more accessible. And I also, for the last almost a year now, been working for an organisation called Spectrum as their physical activity community navigator. So my job is, again, in a similar vein, but much more on a sort of one-to-one basis. So I will have individuals referred to me by health professionals. That could be a GP, that could be an occupational health therapist. It could be any health professional, and I find a little bit more about them, what their interests are, motivates them, and hopefully navigate, in inverted commas, to an appropriate activity. I'm a firm believer that the social model of disability. So I don't actually see myself as having a disability. The thing is, whereas a lot of people, because of their condition, if you like, have got names, I haven't. I was just born with no legs and my arms at the end of the elbow. I mean, I've got full function otherwise. So yeah, I on my passport it says congenital lack of limbs.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's
fair enough on my passport.
Well, I was going to say maybe old school. They used to ask for distinguishing marks.
Okay.
So I must have. Now you said that, I don't think I do anymore. They don't tend to ask for that anymore, but I used to, and that's why I put.
I mean, it's almost as if they need it pointing out to them.
Yeah, you got a photo, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
What more do you need?
Yeah. Yeah, and so you were born in France.
I was.
You was. So does that made you eligible to compete for France, or?
I was told up until the age of 18, sorry, that if I could choose between being French or British. All my family are British, so it was a little bit of a no-brainer. So yeah, and I've always competed for GB.
So were any of your parents French, or both English and just went to France?
Both mum and dad were British. They met and married in Paris, in France, because they were both working there at the time, and they met a church, an English-speaking church in Paris, and that's where myself and I got a younger brother and sister. We were all born out there.
That kind of makes sense. Yeah, so I was like, oh, you could play for France.
Well, I've had people say to me when I wouldn't get selection for GB, he says, well, why don't you try and get to represent France? Well, I never went down that down that route. I wasn't that desperate.
So yeah, so you just had no intention whatsoever to play for France.
No, I mean, I guess if I'd been in a situation where I really wanted to do an event, then I potentially could have done. But that situation, to be honest, the situation never really arose, so I wasn't even forced to think down that route.
So it was your decision at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You weren't in France very long. You came back to the UK shortly after.
Yeah. Parents, part of the company, and I think I'd been 10 at the time, and we moved back to the UK, and been living here ever since.
And well, there's no records anywhere, so I'll let you explain. So the school and college, we started swimming from 5 years old.
Yeah.
And so throughout school and college, how did you sort of like manage the schoolwork going up to like, from SATs or whatever it was back then to GCs, or how did you?
Yeah, no, I'm in my late 50s. So when I was at school, it was GCEs, so O levels and A levels. I went to boarding school from a fairly young age. Well, yeah, from a very young age, because I was living in France, and the French authorities didn't have the resources to support somebody like myself. So my parents made the very difficult decision for me to come over to the UK for about 3 or 4 months at a time, where I would go to school, but I also then have access to occupational therapists, to physios, to prosthetists. So, I mean, for example, from the age, I think I was less than a year old, I had my first ever artificial legs, or prosthesis as they're known now, and I had arms as well. And up until I was in my late teens, mid to late teens, I still used them. I actually found that I was more independent and more capable without them, which is why from then on in, I've always got around mainly in a wheelchair. Schools were pretty much of the grammar school set up. I mean, I don't know if the grammar schools still exist, but that was kind of my that's how my schooling worked. And they're all, again, in inverted commas, special schools. So they're all all my peers had some form of impairment. And it's only when I went on to further education, when I went on to college, that my headmaster was quite adamant. He says, you can go into mainstream. You don't need to go down that route. So I was encouraged to go into mainstream education. So yeah.
And then that helped you get some good results.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah. I always told by my headmaster and some of my teachers, if I put as much effort into my studies as I did in my sport, I'd probably go a lot further in that field.
Yeah. And then your swimming career, you chose GB, and then in 1975.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me how old I am. Yeah.
You won gold at the British Sport Association for the disabled.
Yeah.
At national championships, and you got a gold mainly because there's only just you in that category.
Yeah.
That must be quite...
Yeah, I don't always mention that, but yeah, that's true. It's I think it's a 50-meter backstroke.
Yeah.
And I was the only one in my classification. So I guess I was first and I was last. So yeah. But I guess that that kind of sowed the seed. Thought, hey, I've won gold here. Maybe I can win. Well, maybe I didn't fully appreciate at the time that, I could have taken all day swimming that race and I would have got a gold. I also like to sort of challenge myself. So it's not all about swimming against other people, but it's swimming against against yourself and against times and things like that. But yeah.
I mean, you were just competing against yourself, basically. I mean, even if it didn't go, you still would have won gold.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I remember that there are. I think it was one of the Rocky films. Rocky films they're full of really good inspirational quotes. And he's asked, who. And that's what a coach was saying to him. So, you want to see who your biggest opponent is. Look in the mirror. So you're always competing against yourself, and that way you'll get better. So that's kind of been there with me all my life, really.
Yeah, and I've got another swimming was always your preferred sport. We didn't have any other sports.
I did do other sports. I think it was in it had been in 84, 85. To London Marathon and not long been in existence, and there's a big case where someone wanted to do the marathon in a wheelchair, and he received a lot of obstacles, and the organisers weren't happy about it. They think too much along health and safety, I guess, and they weren't happy with him doing it, but he ended up kind of doing it anyway. And that kind of sowed a seed. And I mean, the wheelchair London Marathon is probably one of the biggest in the in the world. And I saw that, and I said, I want to have a go at this. And I think it was the following year that I managed to get some support from a local paper to get it wasn't even a racing chair; it was just a lightweight chair, and I got support to. So I would. Well, I was still at school at the time. I was in sort of my later years, in my senior years, and I would, when I wasn't studying, I'd be out on the roads, and I end up, long story short, doing I think it's about six Londons. I did about 12 marathons in all around the country. I think I even did the Miami marathon, which was very interesting. Started about 5 o'clock in the morning, because as you can imagine, midday, damn hot. So they started really early. And of course, most recently, wheelchair rugby.
Yes.
Which now nice segue there. Yes.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit later on.
Yeah.
So going back a bit, how did you get? Well, obviously you chose to compete for Team GB.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you get spotted to go from grassroots swimming to the elite Paralympic standard?
Well, it was. I think it would. I'm pretty sure it would have been 84 at the National Disability Swimming Championships at Stowe Mandeville, and they were scouts. Talent scouts there. And I was approached there and said, have you ever thought about the Paralympics? And although I'd heard the name, I didn't know too much about it. Of course, back in the mid 80s, there's still only 3-4 channels on TV, no social media. The papers didn't really give it much, paper time or coverage or anything like that. So I didn't really know what it was, but it didn't take me long to find out that it's kind of the elite end of disability sport, and I'd achieved previous couple of years success at a national level. So next step on that competitive ladder, I guess, is international. So I was invited to be part of the national squad. It got me invites to the national sort of squad weekends, which would be once every 4 to 6 weeks. But that was a real eye-opener for me when that happened, because up until then, all my swimming had either been physio lessons at school, or going along to a disability swimming club where there were no coaches. They're just swim teachers who could advise you on stroke technique, but nothing about building up your speed or stroke, stamina and all of that. So I had to find myself a coach, and that's where I started a real battle, because every club I went to, every coach that I spoke to, couldn't even see how I could swim, let alone being an elite athlete. So I kept hitting brick walls here, there, and everywhere. And then what happened? Divine intervention, luck, whatever you want to call it. I got a job at the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, because I used to live up that way, and of course I then had access to their swimming pool. And it wasn't too long after that actually they had a new pool superintendent appointed, and he happened to be a coach, and he actually approached me and said, "Can I coach you?" And yeah, bit of a no-brainer. And again, he was just open-minded, very forward-thinking, and he worked out quite early on that I still need to have good starts, good speed, good stamina, good technique, but I swim in a slightly different way. And it was very much a partnership, because I knew what my capabilities were, and he knew what I needed to do as an elite swimmer, and got our heads together. And within, I don't know, weeks really, he was able to work out really effective sort of training sessions for me.
So before then, I think no coach. It was all self-taught from you.
Yeah, I would just, for example, the disability sports club that I was a member of, it was only 2 hours on a Sunday. No, nothing on any other days of the week. And I would just get in the pool and I just bang out loads and loads of lengths just to get, a good level of fitness. So yeah.
And he then went on to Fluke in the Seoul Games in
The Seoul Games, yeah.
88.
88.
88. And you got four places.
4 fourths, yes.
Yeah, 4 fours, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that must have been quite, to achieve that in your first games.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Fourths were good and a bad thing. Bad thing because it's very frustrating. I've just trained previous 3 or 4 years to get to a Paralympics, and I know it's to a lot of people, it's not just about the winning; it's about the taking part. But when you're you're an athlete yourself.
Yeah.
You get to that stage. You want to win. There's no other point in doing it otherwise. And I got personal bests, so it wasn't a total loss. But also, when you've been in that frustrating position, your back's against the wall. You fight harder. You say that about a football team going through a bad run. They're one of the worst oppositions you can get, because nothing to lose, everything to gain. And those 4 fourths really sort of pushed me forward. I did go through the dilemma. Okay, I've done the Paralympics. I've done more than a lot of athletes will have done. Do I go for another games? And I was actually thinking about it. It wasn't that too hard a decision in the end. So yeah, I had at least another 4 years left of me. So yeah, I went for Barcelona then.
And the 4 fours, in what category were those in?
Right. So in disability Paralympic sport, you have, for those that may not know, you have a classification system, so that you compete against people of a similar function. You got good level. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever way you want to look at it, word it. But back in Seoul in '88, they had 5 separate classification systems, and they were based on your sort of individual disability. So CP sport would have had their own classification. The powers, would have had their own. The amputees had their own. And I came under, because I didn't come under any of those. There was a classification called les autres, which in French is the others.
Okay.
So if you didn't fit into any other, the National Disability Sports Governing Body classifications, you went into that. And I swam then as an S5, so S being obviously standing for swimming, and 5 being the most severely disabled. And then by the time Barcelona came around 4 years later, they had introduced the classification system that we see now, which incorporates, everybody. And in fact, the classifications is divided up into sports, which kind of makes sense, because you need different skills as a swimmer, as you do as a bocce player, as you do an athlete, as you do a tennis player. So it's all done, each individual sport, as they do now, their own classification system. So
the 4 fours, were they, I'm assuming one was freestyle.
Yeah.
And then the others were
backstroke.
Backstroke.
Yeah.
In which distances?
So they were so I did I'm trying to think. I did 2 25-meter races. So I did 25 back and 25 freestyle. And because backstroke is my fastest stroke, I would swim on my back for my freestyle races. And then there was I think it was a 50 freestyle and 100 freestyle. So those were the four races I did.
Yeah. And what's your, is backstroke your preferred thing to do?
My preferred stroke.
Yeah.
I mean, I could swim on my front, but for example, with breaststroke and butterfly, without the weight and the kick of the legs, I mean, swimmers I know it's difficult to get your head out of the water, and the only way I could really do it was have like an undulating movement on the water, so like a dolphin kick. But with those front strokes, your shoulders aren't allowed to go below the surface of the water.
No. So
I would often get disqualified doing those races. So I would stick pretty much on my on my back. I did try a couple of times to do the front races, but not too much.
You just went in head first.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah.
And then your most successful Olympics was Barcelona, as you mentioned. It's in 1992, and you got gold. Gold and a silver.
No, all three golds.
Oh, that's
3 golds. Yeah.
Missed that one there.
That's all right.
So, in what? Presumably, it was backstroke. You got
backstroke and freestyle.
Yeah. Okay.
So they were all 50-meter. It was an Olympic size pool, which was 50 meters long.
Okay.
And although I must admit, in Seoul, it was still a 50-meter long pool. But at the time, they were still including 25-meter races, within the Paralympic program. And the pools that we used were actually 50 meters long but 25 meters wide. So we actually used to swim widths, which the only time we ever swim widths is that as a kid learning to. So it was a bit of a mind bender. I'm swimming widths here. What am I doing? I'm an international athlete, but that's the way it was. But yeah, in Barcelona, 50 meter back, 50 meter freestyle, and then 100 meter freestyle, which obviously 2 1 lengths and then 1 2 lengths.
Yeah, and the year before that, you got awarded an MBE for your services to the it was for the British Support Association for Disabled People.
Yeah.
And your services to them, as you have fundraised for them quite
Yeah.
a few times.
Yeah. No, when I used to do the marathons, I used to raise money for or BSAD as they were then. Yeah, the British Sports Association for the disabled, and that's where I'm pretty sure where my nomination came from, because some people never even find out. There's a lot of forms that need to be filled out, and then they have to all be signed off and stuff. But yeah.
And who gave you the?
Her Majesty the Queen.
Ah.
So not many people, get that privilege as often. It was often, Charles or Philip. But the Queen presented.
You've got the best fun.
Yeah, I got it. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that was it. You took part in 2 Paralympics.
Yeah.
And what was it a decision that you took not to do anymore, or did you sort of have to retire, or what was the situation going forward?
Well, what happened? It was got a little bit political, I guess, if that's the right term. After I won my races in Barcelona, and by the time we were using this new classification, and I swam as an S2, so 1 being the most severely disabled, and then S10 being the least. I swam as an S2. I found out in February the following year, the powers that be, the international classifiers, decided that I was in the wrong classification. So they moved me up to an S3, and you would think probably it's only 1 class, but when you're at that, within that part of the classification system, there was a massive divide between one classification and another. Certainly there was between 2 and S2 and an S3. For example, I think over at the time on a 50-meter race, it was almost 30 seconds. We're talking about a sprint event. How the heck are you supposed to make up 30 seconds in a sprint event? And they did. The British Paralympic Association fought my case, and I did do a few internationals in the meantime as an S3. But yeah, the international classifiers never wavered, and I remained an S3. So I was kind of forced out, I guess. Which is again very frustrating, because if you stop competing by your own decision, this is the stage you've reached, blah blah blah, or you're not as fit as you used to be. Fair enough, this happens. But when you're kind of forced out, as I felt I was at the time, very frustrating. I mean, some fellow competitors continued swimming after me for at least another couple of Paralympics. But I didn't have that option, so it was a little.
Yeah. So I'm
not bitter. That's right.
Yeah. So your classification wasn't eligible for Paralympics.
Oh, I was eligible, but I'd been moved up. So I was an S2, but I've been moved up to an S3. So no, the qualifying times to be and the records as an S3 were too fast. For me. Actually, I think I was still eligible to compete, but no competition. I was about halfway by the time they were, they'd finished the race. So very frustrating.
So
very frustrating.
Very, yeah, because I was just sort of thinking back to mine, because I got reclassified 2 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah.
It's out of your hands as well. It's nothing you can nothing you can do. And I am grateful, because I did get a lot of support from the BPA, from the British Paralympic Association. They did fight my corner.
Yeah.
But the international classifiers, didn't budge, unfortunately.
So you decided to call time.
Yeah, I mean, yourself, if you're training for a Paralympics, you need to be training every day.
Yeah.
And although I could still do that, it wasn't going to get me anywhere, because I was, I had no option of no possibility of getting anywhere. And whereas the classification system, in my eyes, is all about creating a level playing field. I wasn't within that level playing field, so I was competing against people more able, have more function than me. So what chance did I have?
And so after all that, you then looked more into jobs to help other young disabled people live system after that.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot from my sport, from being physically active. I mean, that's what I mean. The reason I got into, in case I hadn't mentioned, the reason I got into swimming in the first place was for physio, because physios, obviously identified fairly early on, if I was going to have any kind of quality of life and be independent, I needed to have a fit and strong upper body. And swimming is just one of those exercises, good upper body strength, good for your core as well, good for your heart and lungs, so good cardiovascular workout. And so that was my main motivation in the early days. And it's only at the age of 10 that someone said, "Oh, well, have you ever thought about swimming in competition?" And again, to me, swimming was physio, so I hadn't really even considered that route. But if I hadn't been asked that question, maybe I wouldn't be in this position today. So
so talk to me about the jobs you mentioned that you had a job that took you to the coach that you had, and then you've got a few jobs now.
Yeah.
So since the 92 Paralympics, during that 3 decades, I think it is 3 now, 3 decades of working, could you tell us through your job journey?
Yeah. Well, my early jobs were when I first started working at the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, was just basically, a computer operator, a data inputter. I would type up documents, fill out, forms and things like all on computers. And but that actually, because that allowed me then to use the pool in the morning. So my alarm clock would go off at 4:30 in the morning, be in the water for 5:30, swim for an hour and a half, and then go into work. So the jobs at the end, although they weren't the jobs I really wanted, had a means to an end. And it's after I won my golds that I started to think about career. It became immediate, quite early on, that maybe my competitive career wasn't going to develop as it could have done. So I needed to think about another career. And again, see, the lottery wasn't about then either. The lottery came in '96 in Atlanta. So I didn't have any funding, or anything like that. So I need to think about a career. And because I got a lot from my sport, from my swimming, I thought, I've experienced barriers here. Maybe I can support other people to overcome those barriers, help other people take the barriers down. And so I went back to college, and I did an H&D in leisure management. Sports development really wasn't I think it's a term that's being thrown around a lot, but no one, it wasn't really being used a heck of a lot. But it was the only course that was available that I could see that I could maybe develop a career from, from this. And so I did 2 years, at Farnborough College of Technology, and came out of that, and I started working with doing some voluntary work for some charities, and they started offering me some paid work, mainly a sort of sports administration, nothing terribly.
All the admin stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I heard through the grapevine and through my social network. When I say social network, I mean friends. I'm not talking obviously about Facebook or anything like that.
Rented it, I don't think.
No, there you go. I found out that Hampshire County Council's then Disability Sports Development Officer was moving on. And Hampshire County Council said to me, look, we haven't got the funding, to pay you to do the job, but what we can do, we cover your expenses. So I kind of stepped into her shoes after she left, and I ended up organising an activities weekend for a group of young people at CalShot, the outdoor activity centre, and that went really well, to the extent they invited me back the following year to do the same again. And that's when the then English Federation of Disability Sport, they were known by something else at the time, came in, and they negotiated a part-time contract where it'd be part funded, I think, by them, but largely by the three authorities, so Hampshire County Council, Portsmouth, and Southampton. City Council put funding into my post, and I think it was a 6-month contract. Then it became longer, and it then became a full-time post. So nigh on 20 years I worked within Hampshire County Council, and in more recent times of then County Sports Partnership as their Disability Sports Development Officer. And I saw my job was very much working with a variety of different partners, from local authority sports development officers, sports governing bodies, schools, clubs, supporting them in making their sport more accessible, more inclusive.
And kudos to you.
Sorry?
Kudos to you.
I think.
Look at what happened.
Yeah. Yes, and that's kind of as I said, my path for a good sort of 20 years. And then when some cuts sort of started taking place sort of 7 or 8 years ago, within Hampshire County Council, I took voluntary redundancy. And then about 6 months later, was approached by Active Nation, and I've been working with them ever since. So it's
and the listeners or viewers, and that's kind of mine, listen to this. It's just very much Active Nation does.
Yeah, so they've got charitable status. They're contracted by the City Council pretty much to run sports facilities. So you've got the Quays Swimming and Diving Centre, you've got the Outdoor Sports Centre, which is where my offices are based, Bittern Leisure Centre, Chamberlain Leisure Centre, and Woodmill Outdoor Activity Centre. They have some of the outdoor spaces as well. They support, but they do that for on behalf of sort of Southampton City Council. But it was realised, I lose track of time sometimes, 4 or 5 years ago, that it was realised that there are a lot of people missing out. They couldn't, for the reasons I explained earlier, they couldn't get either to one of the facilities or join in a mainstream activity. So the Active Communities team was set up to support those people, again, knocking those barriers down, so that people can still be active in spite of their situation.
Yeah, and it's been quite successful up until COVID happened.
Oh,
yeah, I remember. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about that at the moment, but you were quite successful in the first few years that you.
I mean, we had two really good programs.
Yeah.
One is Active Ability, which actually started out just before I started. I came in to help run that. An active ability is a sports and activity program for adults with with disabilities, physical and learning. Main people that will come along will be from adult and day services, and the funding helped to sort of set that up, sort of pump prime it, get it off the ground. Obviously needed the funding to pay for facilities, to pay for coaches. It would help to subsidise the activity as well, because obviously very much aware that a lot of the people coming along will be on benefits, so wouldn't be able to afford the full price. So it's subsidised, and we're able to keep it down to a sort of £3 a head. Yeah. So people could attend, afford to take part. And the other one is active care. So that's going into care homes. So my job would be to go into a care home, speak to either manager, or a lot of homes now, they've got activity coordinators, talk to them, find out the kind of activities they want, because there's no, I know this is an extreme example, but there's no point in putting on a boxer size class of people who spend most of their time, you sat in chairs. It's all about,
you need to cater.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about providing a bespoke activity. So I would spend time with the activity coordinators, finding out what they wanted, and we would then send the
go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's got to be tailor made. Yeah. Exactly. And then, as history has shown, COVID kicked in, and everything kind of went.
Yeah.
But I'm pleased to say that as from now, we are in a position to start delivering those activities again.
Oh, well, yeah.
So I'm actually, funnily enough, before I came here today, drafting an email, send out to all the homes that we worked with before, to say that we are in a position, and we're getting support from the unit Solent to do that. So that's all. It's taken I'm trying to remember when I came back. It's a year and a half ago. I came back off furlough. All our coaches, you see, were all self-employed. So when COVID hit, they had nowhere. They went on to other jobs. And when I came back off furlough, all the coaching companies I contacted, understandably, have put their prices up because they needed to cover their loss.
Yeah.
So it was that's wood. I can't say anything wood in here, but we've got, it's taken a lot of slog, but we kind of got there now. Yeah. Which is great.
Yeah. So when the pandemic hit 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So your job was never at risk.
No. I was, reassured. Because I honestly, God, I thought, I'm not part of this, because obviously keeping the facility going is a priority. Yeah. So that was going to be, keeping them going. So I was fearful, but I was reassured by management that my job would be safe. So and in spite of cuts as well since then, my job has remained intact. Although it's not a full-time job, it is obviously it's 20 hours a week, but it's enough for me to.
So your job as a nation, did you do anything virtually, or was it just a complete shutdown?
I think there were some things that you could. Active Nation did have some online classes that you could do. That wasn't a route we ended up sort of going down on through the active care or even the active ability route. But the Active Nation did see some online stuff.
Yeah, the local version of Joe Wicks.
Yes. Oh yeah, we had a few people who fancied themselves as Joe Wicks, I think. So
yeah. So we're opening for the last year and a half. We're opening the whole country and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so you said that you recently got another job alongside.
I did. Spectrum, an organisation within Southampton. Their history is putting disability rights. They become a little. I forget the legal term, but they do a lot of other good stuff supporting fundamentally disabled people in their independent living.
Yeah.
So supporting accessing benefits, that kind of
council
stuff. Yeah, we've got contracts with from the city council through them in the past.
Yeah.
And the community navigator team is supporting service users in different areas. So again, we have someone helping people with benefits, homelessness, helping people do their housework, doing their shopping, that kind of thing. We were seeing referrals all the time. And my physical activity job is a pilot, and it started in sort of summer last year, and it was extended after the first 6 months, and it's going really well. And in fact, one of the real success stories is somebody who was referred to me in his late teens, had a routine operation that resulted in him not being able to walk, and as you can imagine, not only affecting him physically but psychologically as well. So you've got very, very low and very low self-esteem. Loves his sport. Season ticket holder down at Saints, for his sins. Things do seem to be picking up, hopefully. And because I'm involved with the wheelchair rugby, I thought, well, here's an opportunity here. He's a wheelchair user. There's going to be other wheelchair users in similar situations to him. He's going to be in the company of other people, peers that have been through, different scenarios. And actually, one of his friends who he meets under the football was a member of the club as well. So I suggested he come down. To be fair, he had thought about it before and had come to a training session, but he was very conscious about his lack of ability, his lack of fitness, his ability to sort of transfer from his everyday chair into a rugby chair. And says, look, come on down. No one's going to force you to get in and take part on your first session. Come down, see a session, meet the players. You'll also then see that we've got fantastic support staff, and transferring from your everyday chair to your rugby chair is a regular occurrence, and there are people to help you to do that. And he's now a regular paid up member of the club, and yeah, as far as I'm aware, absolutely loving it.
Yeah. And you mentioned they brought up a team here.
Yeah.
It's Team Solent Sharks wheelchair rugby team
club. Yeah. Solent Sharks, Team Solent Sharks. Yeah.
And so started 2012.
It did.
Yeah.
2012 legacy in action.
Yes, and at the back of 2012.
Yeah.
So I just get into that role. Was it Matt Bishop or?
I've known Bish for a while. I knew him before. Before that. But no, very brief history. I've found out about it in 2012 when I was working for the County Sports Partnership.
Yeah.
I heard, through the grapevine, particularly from the New Forest Sports Development Officer, that he had been approached by a couple of people who from Salisbury Spinal Unit. I think they're from Salisbury, and it was by his dad, because his dad was in the unit as well, and they'd seen wheelchair rugby in London, and they said they wanted to set the club up. One of the individuals is a lecturer here at Solent University.
Yeah.
And he was able to get some funding from the vice principal to get some chairs, which very kindly did. And the club was set up, and we were down at the St Mary's Sports Centre, and we used to sort of train out of there. Support from coaches at the university, from sports students here at the university as well. I'd actually seen wheelchair rugby myself at the Sydney Paralympics, because although I wasn't competing, I went over because my uncle still lives in Sydney.
Okay.
So I went over to watch the games and stayed with him. So obviously he didn't have any accommodation costs. And myself and a friend, because we had friends that were still competing, and I saw wheelchair rugby there. It was a demonstration sport. It was New Zealand against, I think, either Australia or it must have been Australia. It was in Australia, and they were called the Wheel Blacks.
Okay.
And they had their own haka, and I thought, how bloody cool is this? You know, they tried to keep us, connected to the running game as much as possible. A number of players that were playing, as still are, players who used to play the running game that have broken their backs and can still. So it was an outlet for them who probably thought, broken my back, I can never do sport again. Only can they do sport, but they can also do the sport that they used to do. Although there are some very fundamental differences between the running game and the wheelchair game. And I remember seeing that, thinking, this is amazing. This is going to challenge people's perception of what disability sport is. The uneducated, aren't they? Because I used to get, disabled people doing sport. Oh, aren't you brave? Well, that complete and utter nonsense. Whereas this is a sport when not only were they participating, but they were smashing into each other, full contact. It was absolutely, incredible. And I remember thinking, I want to play this one day. And so when the opportunity came, when it all started in 2012 over here, I thought, I want to be part of that. And they ran some pilot sessions down at Tottenham Leisure Centre, and I got on a chair because we had been loaned some chairs from GBWR, the governing body. And I sat in a chair, and I ended up, get this, I wore rubber gloves on my arms.
Of course.
You had to be able to grip the wheels, and at the time, I didn't have any other option, and I played like that, and I played for the club for 6 or 7 years, I guess, and then, long story short, I developed osteoarthritis in my shoulders.
Okay.
Shoulders aren't designed to weight bear. Not only was I using my shoulders for sport, but I was also using, lifting myself in and out of bed, in and out of the bath, and in and out of the car, lifting my wheelchair in and out of the car. All that was all shoulders. Something had to give, and so unfortunately, my playing career was kind of again forced upon me.
Unless it wasn't a classification.
Well, no, at least yes, indeed. No, at least that, definitely. Yeah, this was a natural thing. I had no control over that. I was already a member of the sort of the committee anyway.
Yeah.
The chairman, again, I lose track of time. About 3 or 4 years ago, chairman stepped down. He had too many work commitments, was starting up a family. So, because I've been involved in voluntary sport before, I said I'll be chairman, and I've kind of been doing that ever since. Yes, I'd love to play, but I'm very much a realist. I know that's and I'd like to get back in a chair again, maybe, but that'll be more for fitness. I won't be competing. I'd love to get back in the chair again, definitely.
Yeah. And so that you're still part of the board now for the club.
Yeah, I'm chairman.
Yeah.
You know, so
yeah, and new band, players are coming through, doing quite well, and a few of them went up to the England squad.
Yeah. In fact, only this morning on BBC Breakfast, one of our players, George Rogers, who actually uses a gym at the sports complex, and I think he's supported by students. He was on BBC Breakfast this morning.
Yes.
Talking about his recent selection. We've also got other players who are on the GB talent pathway. We were after going back to lockdown. When we started coming back, from that, and sports clubs started to open up more. A lot of wheelchair rugby clubs struggled to get their membership back.
Yeah.
We flourished. We still don't know how exactly. And we know, now once people are there, why they stay, because we got an excellent facility, we get excellent support, we got a great atmosphere within the club. Any new people coming along now are fully, welcomed and open arms into the club. The coach, and obviously, get to know them. We always, because people contact us through social media, mainly through our Facebook page, so we're able to keep the coach informed of any new people. Sometimes they contact him direct.
Yeah.
But what Ricky, our coach, will do is he will, once a person's given an appropriate chair, because obviously, you can't get in any old chair. The chair's got to be set up for you to use effectively. He'll call one of the players over. So the players will then take them out onto court and get them, familiarise them with with the sport.
Yeah. And you have a lot of jobs in the sort of background type of stuff.
Yeah.
And coaching was never an option for you to go on to do.
You know what? No. And I don't know why. I think I do. I never saw myself as this is why I think I went down the sports development route. I never saw myself as a coach. There's a lot of retired athletes do kind of go down that road. I never saw that myself. I was more sort of the bigger picture, if you like. So setting activities up, that kind of. I had since considered sort of going down that, because there are obviously courses that you can you can do, but with work and committee commitments, coaching is something I've not. So maybe something's on the cards for later on down the road, but not at the moment.
Yeah, and there's and then the work you're doing is very beneficial for the future generation, the generation coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're leaving your own sort of legacy, your own stamp on the future.
Well, yeah, if that's happening, then that's great. Because something I do, so obviously sympathise with people who get frustrated with the system. We're not just talking about sport, but access and inclusion sort of generally. Yeah. And it shouldn't be like this. But what keeps me going is when I think back to when I first started out, coaches, clubs, didn't know anything about disability sport and how to coach, and even access, it was extremely difficult. Most modern buildings now, have got appropriate access. They've got the flat entrances, they got the accessible changing facilities, they got the clear signage, they've got their wide big space, the big car parks, accessible parking, all of that. So we have come a long way. And attitudes have so you still, like in a lot of cases, still got a long way to go, but a lot better than they were 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's just pretty much that because so the future of the games, and I think obviously the only thing that I could sort of think of is media coverage. I mean, London Surround obviously massive coverage because it was a home game. Rio didn't really hear much, but obviously Tokyo in the middle of a pandemic was obviously more media coverage there. And you know, even though it's not the best at the moment, it's still progressing. Over every 4 years. What do you see for the future for for the impact now up until
One of the an advert, the future's bright, the future's
in LA and
I mean every Paralympics that comes up, I think the coverage does does increase. I mean, I don't in the last sort of couple of Paralympics, you can watch disability sport on what not the red button, whatever Channel 4's equivalent is. So
live streaming and
and live streaming, exactly,
websites
and all that. So it is becoming more visually accessible, so people can see what it's all about. Wheelchair rugby league, which was on, I think towards the end. I think it's the end of last year. For the first time ever, a sport was the World Championships had been made inclusive. So you had the men's, the women's, and the wheelchair game all taking place at the same time, and being televised, which is which again makes it more accessible. I mean, obviously I prefer our version of rugby. It's a lot harder.
The World Championships.
It was.
That was on the BBC.
It wasn't a bit. Yeah. See, there you go.
BBC. I've been watching that.
I mean, case in point, going back to London. Obviously, London got the games, which obviously included the Paralympics as well as the Olympics. I think also it's a great compliment that it wasn't automatically assumed that the BBC would get the Paralympics. Other TV companies had to bid for it, and that again puts it in line with on a parallel with other sort of international sporting events. And I think Channel 4 do a
do a great channel. They're not tied down with any particular influence. They're fully.
Absolutely. And there's only downside, you get chuffing adverts, but I mean, I do.
That's standard. I mean,
standard.
I do hope Channel 4 was a bit like the BBC that have no adverts, but they've got to get their money from somewhere. But hoping it doesn't get privatised, then hopefully it will continue on Channel. And so what's the future for? I mean, are you still connected with something? Are you still, watching from from it?
Not so much. I've still got friends that occasionally in touch with who are involved with the international swimming scene, and my focus has been for many years now very much on grassroots sport rather than performance. I still love watching it. And again, sort of Channel 4 do show the international competitions, but they're not throughout the you don't get as much coverage as you would do at Paralympics.
And obviously you'll be staying on the grassroots. You're getting boxer out there. You're getting rugby out there. All those.
But to me, again, it's not just about the sports. It's about being physically active. So that's something that's a sort of a culture shock I had when I first got into my current roles. whereas before I would work with sports governing bodies, and often they're, if you spotted talent, then you'd have to identify a pathway so they could go and, compete down that route if they want, if they wanted to. The opportunities had to be made known, or make known to them. Now it's very much about being just physically active, getting into the outdoors. I mean, we've got a fantastic facility down at the outdoor sports centre. In fact, in May, for 5 months, once in the middle of Monday of each month, we've got some adapted bikes coming down. So we've got a wide selection of bikes that people can come along. So they're unable to use a regular bike. So we'll have tandems, we'll have seated bikes, we'll have a bike that's got a platform on the front for a wheelchair, so that people can somebody else has got to do all the work, but at least they then get out to the open doors and they can experience what cycling is is all about. So it's very much about being physically and often socially active as well.
Yeah, and may that continue. And that's everything.
Is everything.
Really. And we're nearly coming up to the end of the hour. Anyway. So thank you very much for joining us.
No problem.
Yeah. I'll just stop this.
Voice. Let's go. Voice FM.